but I'd be.
Diana, I am Jim. There's coffee and water and tea back here.
Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
okay.
Yeah,
Where?
right there, to the left.
How are you, Andy?
You all right?
Well,
Good too.
How are you? How about, I saw you. It's only Andy and Diana I haven't seen since February.
There's 10 in this room, 10 can go to Amy, and 10 can go to BIC, or CND. We put them in the lobby or outside. So we don't need all of them. No, Jeff, he said he's all we, as long as we keep it to under 10 per room, except in here, because the board staff are necessary.
You didn't have rain by you all day? Oh, really? It's been raining my house all day.
well, yeah, we're further west. Did you get rain?
Only a tiny bit of a mist, nothing serious.
These are the new papers, Lisa. These are new pages for the,
Yes, I'm sorry, those are your new pages for your budget, binders to replace public safety.
okay. Where's Mike sitting? That was in my stack, that goes to him.
What? I just turned the microphones on and off, but it's on. Sound okay? Okay, okay, great.
Are we, is it time?
Carolyn, after we got 2 minutes left. Carolyn, after they start the meeting, would you mind bringing me the sign-in sheets? Thank you.
We've got one,
Oh, is that,
C and D, so when these folks, because I think he's here to speak on the budget,
okay,
so when these folks get done with public input, I'll have them come down so it's closer.
okay, that's great, thank you.
People over here?
Did everyone get the map book too, or just me?
Other people got theirs earlier, so we actually had them at the legislative breakfast, and it's just taken me a while to get them to y'all since I haven't seen you very much.
Oh, okay, and these are all the maps prepared by, are they
Dan selected the maps to go in there.
very nice?
Yeah, let me know if you think of others you want to put in there. We kind of went around trying to figure out exactly which ones would be helpful for y'all. I'm sure I missed some.
Okay, I
Come
will
on.
take a look. I don't know, we just had nothing to do.
Oh my gosh.
So, I appreciate that. I love the map books. I mean, I get the county ones every year.
I think they're real helpful when you're speaking to the public and stuff, being able to look at
Yeah.
maps, especially one thing you get to is the school district,
Yeah,
but I was kind of holding off to get the new districting, and let's do that map.
Mhm.
And Nick has been having some communication with schools just recently about firming that up, so then y'all have that. I
Okay.
didn't want to do one and then if we got that
Yeah,
as soon as we
yeah.
got to go from there.
Mhm.
We get the hospital to do that. Although I'm sure they're not making that many.
No one's talking, no one, I'm like, can't hear, now you gotta talk.
You need me to talk, Aaron, to test it? Testing, 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 testing. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O. Y'all missed it earlier. I was giving my life stories, and I have no shortage of things to talk about. Testing, testing, testing. You're good? Okay, thanks, Literally.
I don't believe this, but does somebody have an extra pen?
I do.
I usually have like 20 in my purse.
Pen.
Oh, I am,
Wait, I usually have extras too, so I only
Oh,
have
that's
one.
so
wait, I
nice.
got
You
it.
did that?
Oh, no, this is the one that's broken. This one won't work. The one I meant to throw away. It's the only one I've got.
So commissioners, before we start, they can hear me over there, but you're gonna need to pull your mics closer to you so that they can hear you in the other rooms.
Okay.
So just as long as you're close enough, it'll pick it up.
Hello.
All right.
Do you want to test us all, actually?
Can you,
Sure.
Ms. Hill, if you would pull your really nice and close, you have a beautiful, nice speaking voice, but you just pull as close as you can. Just as close as you can get it to you would be great. Your voice and Lindsay's voice are definitely different timbre.
Okay. Is,
Okay, enough said.
does that do it for you?
Well, I'm just gonna ask every time you speak, just make sure you project right.
I sure can do that.
Great school.
Okay. I cannot see that clock, but it looks like it's 6:04. Are we ready to start?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So let's start with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. First, I'd like to just ask everyone to, for a moment, let's stop and think not about the way that the pandemic is affecting us personally, but let's think about the way it's affecting people who are not as blessed as we are, and give our attention to them, and let's do things in a way that honors all of us. Thank you. And we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll call this meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda and consent agenda. Are there any changes, additions, deletions, or corrections?
I move the adoption of the agenda and consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. All right, and we're going to have the public input, and Lindsay has received a number of written submissions for input. They are numerous and they're long, so they will be added to the minutes, but we are not going to be reading those off tonight. What we will do is have individuals come up and speak in public input one at a time. Lindsay, do we know how many are signed up?
We have 8 people signed up.
Okay, and we can begin calling them in. I do want to remind people that we do not have our timer with us, but Lindsay will be timing people with her cell phone, and we are asking 3 minutes, and we're going to try to stick as closely as possible to that. And we will be having one person at a time, and Lindsay will let you know when your time is up. We will not have the 1-minute notification. I'm sorry, but thank you.
And so I'm going to call names 2 at a time, so someone can be out in the lobby waiting for their turn while the first person's speaking. So our first 2 speakers are Charles Esther and Anthony Curtis. Oh, yeah, and they're on a 20-second delay, so it might.
And a question, how many written comments did you have?
I'd have to go back and look. I would say probably maybe 10 or 12
Okay.
additional. And if you'll just state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Charles Esther.
Okay, I'm starting your time now.
Great. Commissioners, planning board members, and staff,
As I said, my name is Charles Esther, and I live on Wilder Ridge in Chatham County. I would like to take this opportunity to provide input into the agenda item related to the conduct of remote Board of Commissioner meetings during the current state of emergency. I recognize and support the need for the board to conduct business and hear from the public even during the current crisis. Furthermore, I would like to commend Lindsay Ray and her staff for developing procedures to provide for public input. The proposed blend of in-person appearances, opportunities to speak remotely, and playing of pre-recorded voicemail messages at board meetings represents the best possible solution to allowing at least a degree of public input while adhering to public safety guidelines. However, the proposed system represents a necessary compromise that will not work well for all proposals. In particular, the need to limit large gatherings deprives the board of valuable information regarding public support or opposition to a given proposal. We have heard repeatedly from the commissioners and others that the number of citizens who attend a board meeting is a powerful indicator of public interest.
Mr. Esther, I'm sorry, can you speak closer to the microphone?
Certainly.
Sorry, thank you.
So let me repeat that what we've heard repeatedly from both commissioners and others is that the number of people who attend a board meeting is a powerful indicator of public interest. This interest is very difficult to gauge when large gatherings are not possible. Therefore, I urge the board to be selective on which proposals are discussed while we remain under a state of emergency that limits the size of public gatherings. Specifically, proposals that have already garnered significant public interest and controversy should be delayed until we can once again allow unfettered public access to the relevant meetings. Clearly, exceptions could be made for proposals that have direct and immediate impact on public welfare. I recognize that such a delay could pose a degree of hardship for certain individuals or groups who have business before the county. However, I do not believe such hardships to be out of line with that experienced by many Chatham County citizens. Delaying controversial proposals will allow the commissioners and citizens to focus their energy towards efforts to mitigate the current crisis. A delay will also allow the board to better assess the economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic with regard to new proposals. I think that we can all agree that our future will be very different from what we envisioned just a few months ago. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I do
Before
have
we,
copies.
yes, if you can just leave them with the county manager right there, I'll grab them from him.
Great, thank you.
And before we go to the next person, for all the speakers that are coming, we need you to speak directly into the microphone so that people on the live stream can hear. So just make sure you get as close to the microphone as you can. Our next speakers are Anthony Curtis and Alicia Kablansky.
Good evening, Board of Commissioners. Thank you for taking the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Anthony Curtis. My wife and I moved here from Alamance County last year, where I've lived my whole life. In fact, and with the exception of recently, I've lived in Saxbahal, just a few miles to the north, since I was born. I know you are all very busy, especially now, considering the effects this quarantine is having on the state and the county's economy. So to that end, I will try to keep this fairly brief. We are living in unprecedented times. Any one person presenting a path that claims to be best for all is folly. We are living in a state that changes and must change the equations that have guided this county's decision-making process. I think it would be safe to say that our priorities as a whole have changed, and what used to be essential for progress benefits now only a very, very few of our citizens. You will likely hear tonight Bold Development's lawyer argue on behalf of policies in favor of expediting land management decisions, despite their being antithetical to the current needs of the county. He will even likely mention Williams Corner by name. That is, after all, what he is being paid for. That is essentially why I'm here tonight, to offer counterpoint and urge you to please wait and revisit land management concerns once our county has rebounded, and give developers an opportunity to revisit and at the least their economic impact studies, which have undoubtedly been altered by the current state of affairs. These types of delays would not be without precedent. In fact, the state just passed guidance for handling land management decisions that would make delaying perfectly appropriate and within the law. This is in part evidenced by Session Law 2020-03, Senate Bill 704, which offers considerations for delays of permitting and building of development permits during this pandemic. For what it's worth, I feel that the next several months should be focused on the recovery of our county, our education system, and the recovery of those citizens hit most hard by the impacts of this unprecedented time. Please, I urge you, take the next several months to tend to our wounds. Let's work together to get this recovery on the right track. Let's get these meetings working so that our community can offer solutions and ideas for how we, together, can come back to a place where it would be appropriate to begin to argue in favor of new expansion. Out of fairness, equity, and efficiency, let's take the time needed to appropriately develop the type of rule changes that Nick Robinson detailed at the April 20th meeting. Moving in that direction is prudent, but hastiness in this regard will undoubtedly subvert those reasonable accommodations he also detailed. Now is not the time to push for growth when our citizens can't pay rent. Now is not the time to set precedent with regard to size, scale, and scope of new developments. Now is the time to be conservative and take care of those more impacted. If this county does not succeed together right now, it cannot succeed through ill-conceived expansion. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Howard, I'm getting text messages from staff to say they cannot hear the speakers. Is it okay to ask them to lower their mask while they speak?
Yes.
Okay.
Please do.
Lindsay, if somebody, could pull that mic down, I think that would help a lot.
So for everybody outside who is going to speak, we need you to hold the microphone to your mouth, not actually touching it, but as close as you can get, and please speak directly and as loudly as possible. Our next speakers are Alicia Koblansky and Tracy Falliger. I'm sorry, let me get the time. Okay, I'll start your time now.
All right, thank you. Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Dr. Alicia Koblansky. I'm a Chatham County resident who is a critical researcher investigator at ViiV Healthcare GSK and also a professor in the Department of Infectious Disease at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I thank you for this opportunity to be heard in these unusual times during this pandemic. As a professional working in the field of infectious disease, I'm acutely aware of the current situation we are in our country. I applaud the decisions that this council and the staff have made over the past few weeks regarding handling of government issues and communicating with the current situation to its citizens. And I applaud my fellow citizens of Chatham County who collectively made these recent public health guidelines a success, even though through a concerted effort helping the most vulnerable and most susceptible. Many in our community are scared and worried, and it's up to our leaders to be mindful of that and the needs of the many versus the needs of few. As I listened to the April 20th, 2020 Board of Commissioners meeting, comments were given to, requesting our commissioners and staff develop a route for conducting planning and land use matters during these unprecedented times. In particular, the request compared our county to other jurisdictions like Southern Pines that have implemented policies for remote legislative public hearings. At best, it is challenging to draw a direct comparison of these smaller projects to larger, more widely contested proposals that are being planned to be presented to you. One such proposal, Williams Corner, is so controversial that a petition was started requesting that the Board of Commissioners vote no to the rezoning outright. This petition is now approaching 1,000 signatures. Recently, the General Assembly realized that the pandemic itself is going to involve shutdowns which will adversely affect local government. They passed legislation, Session Law 2020-33, Section 440, to extend the effective date of land use policies for 5 months. It would not be inappropriate to use this as a model to handle controversial proposals. This pending proposal does not have a shot clock, so to speak. They are not critical to the operations of our county. At some point in the future, we will need to discuss land management, and this should be included in the input of, but we should include the input of a whole community and not a chosen few, or in this instance, a interested lawyer on retainer by a local developer. As a citizen, I try to be mindful for the greater needs of everyone in my county. The Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, stated that almost 40% of American households making less than $40,000 a year had lost a job in March. The Census Bureau has given Chatham County an average per capita income of $39,299. This would suggest that Chatham County may be disproportionately affected by this economic downturn. And I would request that we focus on these items. Our country needs to take steps to protect those most affected. And as our county manager, Dan Lamont, mentioned in his budget presentation, we will need to make difficult choices in our time. I thank you for your attention and look forward to hearing Lindsay Ray's presentation on recommendation from the staff on how to conduct remote Board of Commissioner meetings and planning staff meetings in the future. And I look forward to help testing these renditions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speakers are Tracy Falliker and Laurie Slade.
If you have written comments that you'd like to leave, you can.
She's already submitted
You have
them.
submitted them? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lacey. And Tracy, if you don't mind pulling your mask down while you speak into the mic, or just speak
Can
really
you guys hear
loudly.
me pretty well?
I'll
Good
start your
evening.
time now.
Good evening, dear commissioners. Lindsay Ray. I want to thank you all for allowing us to provide input on how to move forward with public hearings in light of this pandemic. Public hearings are a vital part of a fair and just government. There are a few areas in the legislative government process where those of us who are living on the land, the boots on the ground, contributing to the community, supporting local business, where we actually get to participate in the decision-making process as to what new development should be allowed to affect our livelihood. Without the consideration of public input, we wouldn't quite have a democracy. Public input must be provided for, and having the patience to wait for the safest time may be hard for some to understand. The real question at hand is, what are the types of decisions that are waiting for a public hearing that should be postponed until it's safe so that all generations and citizens with varying immune systems can safely attend, versus what types of matters could remote public hearings work best for? This is why we're here tonight. Mr. Nick Robinson in April informed you that Southern Pines is having success in moving forward with remote public hearings. Fortunately, those hearings were for small parcels. And Mr. Robinson may have assisted us in discovering that for small, non-controversial land use proposals, that maybe you can remove the public from public hearings. What is suggested tonight is not what can work for all type of public hearings. Proposed controversial developments must be dealt with in all seriousness. That includes, with all sincerity, the public's opinion. And Williams Corner is at the very least controversial. It's a gleaming example of a controversial rezoning hearing that must have all of those who are affected be able to participate in the public hearing format. Waiting might be tough for the developer. You know, I get that, but consider the ramifications of moving forward with those large controversial hearings in the same exact manner that a 3-parcel rezoning on perhaps a private person's land gets handled the same way. This kind of downplays the importance of these larger scale proposals, not even mentioning the fact that they're controversial in the first place. We must wait until it is safe to move forward with public hearings on controversial proposals. Controversial proposals must be handled differently than non-controversial small-scale proposals. They're not the same. They're just not the same. The number of people that a large controversial proposal affects must be considered with the utmost care and inclusion of all citizens. Technical problems with either even the private citizen's computer or the county can bring forth negative consequences, even perhaps irreparable damage to our citizens' participation in public hearings at all, which affects our democracy and our ability to participate in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speakers are Laurie Slade and Laura Bradley. start your time now.
Good evening. My name is Laurie Slade, and I'm a resident of Legend Oaks subdivision in Chatham County. The current pandemic has really changed many people's behaviors, particularly in our neighborhood. I stand here today to emphasize my belief that speaking out at a public hearing is vital to our governmental process. Many in my neighborhood will not venture out into public settings at this time. Furthermore, the prudent among them may not venture forth until a proven vaccine has been developed and is readily available. I can't blame them for their caution. I fully recognize that the business of government can't be shut down indefinitely. I applaud the efforts that have been made to reach out virtually to gather input. I would hope that written comments would also be included in the record and the decisions of this board. Please continue to seek ways for all to voice their concerns in these troubling times. I understand that different people have different visions for Chatham County and what is the best way to move forward. I ask that our Board of Commissioners do their level best to gather input from all, even the technology challenged like myself, and those who are isolating themselves to protect themselves and others. Thank you for working on behalf of us all, and thank you very much for developing the plans that you have been working on.
Thank you.
Our next speakers are Laura Bradley and Nick Robinson.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Laura Bradley, and I've been a resident of Chatham County since 2012. I'm here tonight to talk about the proposal to move forward with remote public meetings and hearings. I am encouraged by the proposal the staff will lay out for you tonight. I particularly support the idea of citizens having several ways of providing feedback, including voicemails and remote participations. And I'm very grateful to Lindsay and the rest of the staff for all of her hard work. While I urge you to adopt this plan, I also encourage you to take this opportunity to provide additional assurances to our county that essential business will be prioritized over long-term development projects. It's obvious the county needs to be able to move forward here, but I question whether remote public hearings are appropriate for highly contested controversial matters. The sheer volume of community members who've already demonstrated concern for Williams Corner, for example, make relying on remote technology concerning. Moreover, it's just not an efficient use of anyone's time, the community, staff, or you, the commissioners. When we are in the state of emergency, there's not time for that. Controversial rezoning matters are quite simply a time suck, compounded by the fact that for many of our citizens, it's the first time we've engaged with local government. And as such, with a large group, there's a huge chance for misinformation, which requires even further demands on the county's time. In a non-pandemic scenario, sifting through hundreds of emails, calls, and hours-long hearings can be challenging. In an emergency, it's inappropriate, if not impossible. Our county needs your time to be freed up to focus on the critical day-to-day challenges of resource allocation, public health, and ensuring we have sufficient funding to meet our ever-growing needs. Quite simply, we're in survival mode right now. Our focus is on meeting daily needs for ourselves and our neighbors. There will be time to plan for what our community looks like years from now. This is not that time. Please be judicious in your usage of remote public hearings while we are still facing this crisis, and limit them to essential business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speakers are Nick Robinson and Marion Norton.
Good evening. Honorable Chairperson, board members, my name is Nick Robinson, and I am a resident, Chatham County, practicing law at 128 Hillsborough Street. I'd like to direct my comments to the board's deliberations about how to proceed with remote legislative public hearings during the COVID restrictions. A few background facts I think will be helpful to your deliberations. One, to my knowledge, because of COVID, the board has held no citizen-prompted public hearings since February 17th, 2020. And based on my review of the county planning website, there appear to be six citizen-filed applications now awaiting public hearings. The applications with the most seniority, i.e. the ones longest pending without a hearing, are the two Williams Corner applications, which were filed on January 31st, 2020, for public hearing 2 months ago on March 16th, 2020. The remaining four that are awaiting public hearing, one for Glandon Forest, remember that name because I'll mention it later, and 3 for the Vickers-Bennett text amendments, were filed 2 monthly cycles after Williams Corner was filed and would have been scheduled for public hearing tonight. That's just to give you the roadmap of where we are. I've read through the county staff's recommendation for remote public hearings and their recommendations of how to physically and technologically handle the remote public hearings, I think are excellent. However, the recommendation of further delaying Williams Corner public hearings and holding the later filed Glandon Forest public hearing at next month's meeting in June as a test run, because it may be non-controversial, would be, without a doubt, prejudicial and extremely unfair. This is because your ordinance does not call for public hearings in July. So the delay for Williams Corner, which has already waited 2 months longer than all of the other applicants, would be an additional 3 months from now. If you're going to hold any public hearings in June, it should be the Williams Corner public hearings, since they were filed first and they have been pending twice as long as all of the others. Who's to say that the Williams Corner meeting won't go well under these new approaches? And even if it does have some logistical difficulties, isn't it better to begin ironing them out now rather than waiting 2 more months when the same or different problems may arise? I've sat through hundreds of public hearings in Chatham County, and we have soldiered through all manner of issues over the years. Huge crowds, power failures, location changes, projector failures, HVAC issues, microphone issues, you name it. We, including all the folks who have already spoken tonight, we are a good, flexible, and resilient constituency. We can make it through the remote Williams Corner public hearing in June, but preemptively delaying Williams Corner in favor of choosing another later filed application is not countenanced by your practice, your ordinance, nor by the law, in my opinion. Last paragraph, we believe it would be inappropriate to single Williams Corner out for exceptional and prejudicial treatment, i.e. only a 1-month delay for Glandon Forest and a 5-month delay for Williams Corner. We request that you hear Williams Corner in June, and let's see what happens from there. Thank you very much.
Our last speaker is Marion Norton.
County Commissioners, thank you for allowing me to speak today. 3 minutes will probably not be enough time to address my concerns, but I have them in writing for you. I'm especially thankful today for life, for my home, and for my country. At your last meeting, a vote was taken to amend the Chatham County zoning ordinance. Among the additions was Section 8 on recreational vehicles. The wording of the ordinance allows them to be stored unoccupied on residential lots. The only provision for temporary occupancy is during new construction or replacement of damaged or destroyed home when work is ongoing with a valid building permit. I'm asking tonight that you remove 4A in Section 8. Leaving B and C in place will still make it unlawful for them to be permanent residences, even though I'm not sure I fully agree that Chatham County needs that ordinance. The ordinance as written does not allow for personal discretion in the temporary occupancy of a RV. Provisions like 4A1 not to be connected to any permanent utility service. The use of extension cords for cleaning and/or repair is allowed on a temporary basis. Do not help persons that find using an RV during a pandemic is a helpful and healthy option. Currently, self-contained RVs are being promoted as a way for frontline healthcare workers in COVID-19 environments to isolate and protect their families while still being able to come home between shifts. They should not be restricted in plugging in these units for comfort and safety. Many families are now dealing with both children at home from school and the challenge of working from home. Self-contained RV units make an ideal space for a Zoom meeting or a quiet place for a student to complete online schoolwork. However, one must be allowed to occupy and to make an electrical connection. The requirement for registration and licensing is not well synced with current state law and county provisions. In January of 2020, the county tax office required listing of unlicensed vehicles for taxation. Recreational vehicles without a current road use tag are among those required to be listed. The zoning ordinance adopted last month requires unregistered RVs to be registered. The state now only does tags with taxes. That means that law-abiding citizens who listed an RV in January will be charged taxes 2 times this year in order to comply. I see no need for a zoning ordinance that is supposed to regulate land use to enter into the business of requiring tags or insurance. That is regulated under the authority of the NCDOT. The rest of my comments are printed out for each of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you've provided a copy of the written comments already?
I gave
You do, okay.
left enough copies for everyone to have.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Norton, just real quick, because I wanted to comment. I think that I had included the county manager on an email to planning staff on that, but I don't believe I failed, or I don't believe I copied the rest of the board about maybe changing that language to a state of emergency situation, and so I appreciate you bringing that up. And
I think there's quite a few things in there we just don't need. I don't think that a county zoning ordinance needs to tell me what I can store in my RV. My son just asked me, he said, now, if you were making meth there, it might be a difference, but what are you going to do with your Christmas decorations?
Understood. So I just wanted to let you know that is something that
It needs to be looked at.
I had raised with staff and that they were looking at, so thank you.
That is all that signed up to speak.
All right, thank you. So we will now move on to the public hearings. And our public hearing to receive a comment on the fiscal year 2020-2021 recommended budget. Dan Lamontagne will review the specifics of the request.
You're gonna have to really speak up.
Get the
At the bottom, just click on the PowerPoint at the bottom.
Good evening, Commissioners. The budget theme we have reflects the difficult choices we had to make as we developed the budget for in this season of extreme uncertainty. In the face of many unknowns, we had to focus on what we do know, project revenue cautiously, and make careful choices about the services that we can provide. This presentation is a brief overview of the budget. The complete document is available on the website. This is the budget at a glance, which is included at the beginning of the document. This recommended budget, I will say, keeps the tax rate steady and presents a balanced budget. Before the budget slide.
Gotta be louder. Gotta be louder, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
What? Yeah, take it out of the thing and hold it, sorry.
There we go. That sounds better. Before the budget is finalized, the commissioners will hold a public hearing, which is tonight, and we'll have work sessions on May 21st, 22nd, and 28th if needed. They'll make changes based on the public input. The budget, again, is posted on the county's website. To speed the understanding of the budget, if you will read the budget message, it contains an overview of the entire document, and additional details are available in the department sections of the budget. So, budgeting in troubled times. The budget had to be created during much uncertainty, as you're all aware. This current economic recession is unlike anything we've experienced. The Great Recession in 2008 was a slower decline followed by a slow recovery. This recession, caused by something completely beyond our control, was a sharp, steep, immediate decline, and nobody can predict the shape of the recovery. We don't know, and nobody knows, when we'll start to see recovery, how quickly that recovery will happen, what the impact will be on the stock market, what will be the impact on the construction and the sales tax in the current year and the upcoming year, and to what extent the property tax revenues will be impacted by potential foreclosures as a result of this recession. How will the county construction projects be impacted with the potential shifts in the cost of materials and construction costs? How will the debt market adjust? And what impact will that have on our the county's debt model and our CIP schedule? In the face of so much uncertainty and speculation, we've deliberately tried to focus on what we do know. We do know that the economy goes through ups and downs. We do see a recovery. Until the decline, Chatham County was exceeding revenue expectations. We were having a great year. This crisis has made us more resilient. We also know that our staff represents the best in public service, and we saw evidence of this as this virus emerged. Our staff responded to the crisis and stepped up and were collaborative and innovative and adapted to the changes that came. The health department and emergency operations did a tremendous job. They were faced with a huge situation and handled it professionally and calmly. DSS continues to provide much needed services in this time of real need for people who need their services. They have continued on and done wonderful work. The Council on Aging has continued to provide services to their clientele in a time when they need it, and they're homebound. Many people are volunteering. Our staff are volunteering to help check on people who are homebound, deliver meals. Parks and Recreations found new and innovative ways of reaching even more people than they had before. Our libraries have seen over 200 library cards issued just since this, and are expanding their online services and seeing much more participation. All of our staff have pitched in to help other departments, volunteering where they can. Just in the room behind me is new storage for emergency meals, PPE. The staff in this facility are helping manage those materials with emergency management. And I have to say to the budget staff, this has been a time when our entire idea of what our budget was going to be flipped in no time, and they had to completely shift gears and come up with a new budget, essentially, in the face of this drastic change. So I thank the budget team for that. Amid all the speculation reports and the downturn, we continue to check our revenue during the preparation of the budget. We haven't seen a loss yet. As things stand today, it appears that we'll meet our budgeted revenue for the current year, or worst case, come in slightly under our target. Again, we were having a great year. To date, building inspections and environmental health are at 99% of their budget as of May 1st. Property tax collection is slightly over budget. Our locally collected sales tax is 13% over budget. We're $1 million over the same time period last year. So again, good year we were having. Our excellent performance for most of this year will enable us to meet our or exceed our budgeted revenues for 2020. So that strong position we are in this year helps us. Typically, we look at several economic indicators when we prepare to project our revenue for the upcoming year. Unemployment's growing, but Chatham County's typically had one of the lowest rates in the state and stays well below the nation. Looking back for comparison, in January of 2010, Chatham's rate was 9.7 with the closing of the chicken plants in Siler City, and the state and national rates were 12 and 10.6, respectively. So even in the worst of times, we typically have a lower unemployment rate than other jurisdictions, and we trend below the state and the nation. The housing industry usually provides another indicator. The real estate market in the Triangle region has been excellent, and the same has been true for Chatham County. Real estate in Chatham is desirable, and up to the crisis, the homes were selling for more than the asking price. While the industry is slowing down, the Triangle region typically is less vulnerable to those impacts. Our excise tax increased steadily since 2010. We saw a double from 2010 to 2019. Through March of 22, revenue was up 9% over the same period the prior year. And our real estate market is slowing down, but the Triangle Business Journal reports that the Triangle region market will be less vulnerable to the impacts. These things that have made Chatham desirable in the past will continue to make us desirable as we go through the recovery. Building permits is another economic indicator. We were exceeding our expectations in the current year. Activity has slowed down somewhat in April, but it's picking up again. Several commercial permits are about to be issued, and Mosaic and Chatham Park are continuing. This is another area we expect to rebound faster than other counties because the large projects in progress will not stop. Projecting into an unknown future is risky. There's a lot of speculation. Time will tell whether projections are correct or incorrect. Revenue projections are broadly conservative. Every day there's another report to consider, another speculation or outlook. For most of our revenues, we've been conservative, backing roughly 3% off of what our current year collection has been. Chatham County's excellent revenue outlook in the current year will lessen the impact of the slowdown. Many smaller counties will be harder hit. Our local sales tax collection is comprised of necessary and discretionary spending, but is not impacted by loss from such things as sporting events, concerts, and conventions like some of our surrounding counties that depend on that for their sales tax. Excuse me. We're budgeting in 2021 at the same level as FY20, which was less than the actual revenue collected in the current year. As shown in the recovery from the Great Recession, we expect Chatham to recover at a faster rate than many surrounding counties. Again, our excellent performance in our current year leaves us at a high point. The conservative revenue projection means that we've had to make difficult choices about the services that can be included in the budget. The choices we've made reflect our values, maintaining the integrity of our debt model, supporting our school system, and our people, which equates to the services we provide. Also, since we know our projections, like all projections, could turn out to be wrong, we do have a risk mitigation strategy. We've asked all departments to delay any non-essential expenditures during the first quarter of the fiscal year and conduct a review of their budgets to find potential reductions should things get worse. We don't know if we'll see a recurrence or what the recovery will look like. Our debt reserve. The budget continues the 9.2% contribution to the debt reserve. Borrowing is in progress for the radio replacement project. In the past several years, we've undertaken several debt-funded projects in the CIP. We've completed the CCC Health Sciences building. Chatham Grove Elementary School is almost finished, and the new high school will be complete next year. That was a large amount of borrowing, and so far we've been paying interest only. But as the buildings are completed, we'll begin paying the principal. We've added 3 new debt-funded projects last year. We started the process to borrow for the radio replacement project, and according to the CIP, next year we'll begin the borrowing process for the EOC expansion and the school central services facility. We've been steadfast in our contribution to the debt reserve. According to our debt model, we don't undertake debt without planning for the repayment. Bottom line, while our debt payments are increasing, we plan for that, and when we develop our budget, paying our debt is our first priority. Second, supporting our Chatham County schools has always been a high priority. In FY21, Chatham County Schools is requesting an additional $2.2 million, roughly. This includes an additional $1,261,889 in the general allocation to support the opening of the Chatham Grove Elementary School in August, an additional $968,111 to support the teacher supplement, just to maintain the supplement at the current level. That's not an increase in the supplement. That's to hold the level steady. A few years ago, speaking on the supplement, a few years ago we began the model the teacher supplement as a percentage of teacher pay, and up until that time it had been the flat amount. Our goal for the teacher supplement is to maintain Chatham standing as the 5th in our region. This year, Chatham was surpassed only by Wake, Chapel Hill, Durham, and Orange systems, which are much larger. However, as demonstrated in this budget, the current model for funding the supplement as a percentage of teacher pay is difficult to sustain, due in large part to our inability to predict the state-directed teacher pay raises and the mandated increases in the retirement rates. Without the just-in-time addition of the Article 46 revenue, we would have been unable to support the supplement as requested due to the economic downturn. Budget and finance staff from the county and the Chatham County Schools are working to develop a more sustainable model and support the teacher supplement in future years. On to people and our services that we provide. The recommended budget includes a small number of additions that are needed to meet the current workload demand and the increase expected in the coming year. We've staged these additions to help us contain the costs. First, we're looking at 2 detention officers, one to start in July and one to start in October. In DSS, we're looking at 3 positions, 2 to start in October and 1 in January. These are for social workers. And then 1 substance abuse counselor to start in January that is partially grant funded. A few more items to include in the budget. Council on Aging, we're recommending a family caregiver respite amount of $35,000. This is to help keep people at home and not going to congregate care facilities. And a general allocation to the Council on Aging for $25,000. A Visit NC Farms app that will help tourists find agritourism in the county. This was underway before we started the budget. A market pay study for county employees. The last one was done in 2008. A capital outlay one-time spending. We got portable bleachers for this facility, the Ag and Conference Center. A vehicle for a health department, which is, we've seen a real need for that as nurses doing contract tracing have been in need of a lot of vehicles. A truck for cooperative extension. They currently use their own personal vehicles. We think they need a vehicle for that. Feasibility study for phase 2 of this Agriculture and Conference Center. And a no-till drill for soil and water to help the agricultural community here in Chatham. Some of the highlights, the general fund is 5% increase over the previous year's budget. Again, that's not over what we expect to collect this year, but that's over our previous year's budget. Utility fund has seen a 14% increase. This continues the contribution we have for Siler City's wastewater treatment plant improvements. It includes several large one-time maintenance projects, such as cleaning the lagoon, replacing some other equipment at the water treatment plant that are more than 20 years old equipment, and a water loss monitoring study to allow us to find and fix leaks. Also includes a payment to the state for the Jordan Lake allocation for our water supply. Solid waste is looking at a decrease, and most of that decrease is due to moving some of the sustainability spending out of the solid waste budget into a separate line. And the Southwest Water District is seeing a 41% increase. So in summary, again, projecting into an unknown future is risky. and quite confusing, frankly. Until COVID-19, Chatham County was having an excellent year. We expect Chatham to recover at a better rate than many of our other counties. The budget addresses our top priorities, which is maintain the debt model, support the schools, and provide critical services to support our people. We'll be monitoring the revenue and expense closely as we go. Again, just to recap, before the budget's finalized, the commissioners are doing tonight, hearing the public hearing. We'll hold work sessions on the 21st, 22nd, and 28th if needed, and make changes based on the public input. The goal is to have the budget finalized on June 15th, and a state law requires adoption by June 30th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I will open the public hearing. And Lindsay, I can't recall whether, did we ask about written comments for the public hearing? Do you have any?
Yes, we did. So I've already received public comments from every person signed up to speak.
Okay.
And we had some in addition to that would be included in the record.
Okay. And we also have someone here physically to speak.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. So let's proceed with having the input from the person that is here.
Okay.
And were you planning to read those comments into the record, or will those also be
They'll just be
incorporated
included in the
record?
minutes.
Okay.
For the people who emailed them in prior.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So our first two speakers, I'm not sure if they're physically here, are Ken Tunnel and Debbie Tunnel. Wait 20 seconds. Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. So our final two speakers are Doug Emmons and Robert Shy.
Do you have a list of the people who sent in comments for public hearing?
I would have to go back through my email and gather them all.
How many did you have, did you say?
We probably had an additional 8 or 9 on the budget.
Okay, because about waiting for the minutes, which could be a month from now, I'm wondering if you could go ahead and distribute those to the commissioners.
Yes, I'll forward them all to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Mr. Emmons, I'll start you now.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to remove this because I can't breathe. Sure. My name is Doug Emmons. I'm a Chatham County resident. I'm here tonight on behalf of Main Street Pittsboro as both a board member and current treasurer. So thank you all for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm here actually to make a request of the board for funding in support of Main Street Pittsboro for FY 2021. If you recall, back in November, Maria Parker Lewis, our president, had...
Can you get closer to the microphone? I'm sorry, or even hold it.
Sure. Put it up. Maria Parker Lewis had made a request of the board for $16,000, which you approved, and we very much appreciate. That funding was specific for the upfit of our Welcome Center, which is at 37 Hillsborough Street in the corner of the circle. The exterior is still awaiting the facade. So it looks a little weird right now, but the inside is almost finished, and we're really proud of what it's shaping up to become. The situation clearly has changed, as Dan just mentioned with the pandemic. A lot of things are uncertain, a lot of things are not known. But we're forging ahead with this Welcome Center because we believe it has the potential to make an impact in downtown Pittsboro, not only for downtown, and not only for the town of Pittsboro, but for the county. It's our intent to basically represent the businesses and the sites and attractions across the county as well as downtown that visitors, residents, and other businesses would like to see and can take advantage of here in Chatham County. Our goal right now is to complete the upfit by the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, to have a soft opening sometime this summer, and then have a formal grand opening later this year, subject to when North Carolina can allow us to congregate more freely. Our situation is that our Main Street parcel, our district, represents 148 parcels in the GIS map. And that group of parcels today contributes $189,000 a year in county taxes. We're actually asking the county for support of $25,000 for next year against that. And it's also our understanding that in the budget, there's a reserve ratio of about 27.8%. And against an annual budget, general fund of 135 million or so, that reserve ratio comes out to about $35 million. That's 27.8%. If you decrease that by just 0.1% to 27.7%, that would generate $35,000 in income, which is more than what we're asking for in funding. So we humbly request that you consider our request for funding to actually assist in us in the operation of our Welcome Center for next year. And I thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Moncur Fire Chief Robert Scheid.
Hello there. Hello. Nice to see you guys. I haven't seen any of you since this all started. Hope you're well. The most important thing. I apologize for my appearance. We had a bunch of calls today. I was trying to get into my dress uniform, but it didn't happen. So I submitted some remarks that are a little more in-depth because I know I don't have much time right now, but I'll just hit the big points. As you're aware, we've requested an increase in our tax rate for Moncur Fire Department. We're fully aware that this is probably not the best time to do that, but we do feel that it's urgent and desperately needed. Our entire increase in the budget is going to one category, payroll and benefits, for two projects in that category. One is salary increases for our full-time staff, excluding me. I wouldn't come asking for an increase for me. That's terribly, terribly needed. We've done a pay study, and our top-end salary in each ranked position is lower than the starting salary at North Chatham and Pittsboro Fire Departments, and way less than Apex or Holly Springs, who are our competition. That puts the amount of overtime they work, 880 hours extra a year, over 40 hours a week. When you factor that into their salary, a firefighter who's been there 5 years is making less than $11 an hour. A captain is making less than $15 an hour. It's just, I can't keep our employees. We keep losing them one after another to bigger departments. And it's really, it's frustrating, it's bad for service, and we're not building a bench of people to take over when I step down. So it's a real situation. The other thing we're asking for is some additional staffing to be on duty at times when volunteers are scarce, which is more and more these days. This is especially important now in times like COVID, this pandemic. We're running more calls for service, and our EMS allocation in the county has changed. Briar Chapel and all the development in Pittsboro has changed call volume, and for the first time in 20 years, or more than 20 years, I've been around for almost 20 years, we've always had a full-time ambulance in Moncur. We now do not. And so we've stepped backwards in our coverage. Starting December 12th, we only have a 12-hour ambulance right now with one person on it, whereas in the past we had a two-person ambulance 24/7. Anyway, I will wrap up, but I would just like to say this is vitally important to the health of our citizens. We're the only, we're the stopgap measure until EMS can come from Pittsboro, hopefully from Pittsboro. Our board, is elected to represent the citizens of our community. They are citizens of our community. There are 9 members, and they have thoroughly researched this and worried over it and deliberated and decided that this is the best thing for our community and for the people that live there, including myself and my children and my family, and their children and their family there. So if you would, we're asking that you approve our request, and if you need any more information, we're happy to come and talk at great length, and my board chairman's happy to attend as well. Thank you. Sorry for going over.
Thank you.
That is all that signed up to speak.
All right. So I will not be calling on the clerk to read the submitted comments, but I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And we'll move on to our final item, board priorities, to receive a recommendation for staff on how to conduct electronic meetings during states of emergency. And I believe Lindsay will be presenting this item.
So if you don't mind waiting just 1 second, I need Caitlin to be able to come back in so she can take minutes while I present.
Absolutely. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to say how lucky we are to have you doing this, and how I know that you've gone, I mean, this was not part of the landscape when you were considering this position, and you have gone above and beyond. I have heard from other jurisdictions about the extent to which you have researched the options, and I know that we will ultimately figure this out.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. And can y'all hear me okay? Aaron already told me I project very well, so do I need to hold the microphone? Okay. Oh, good, okay. Okay, so we'll get going. So on April 20th, the board directed staff to develop a recommendation to present at the May 18th meeting that would allow for the commissioners to hold remote and in-person public hearings together. So not just a remote meeting where people are on their computers at home, but also provide an opportunity to speak in person. And so the things that I heard that you specifically requested were to provide in-person public input at a physical meeting, a way to provide remote public input, and if possible, a way to use our Granica software for live streaming on our website. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and address that last bullet really quickly. It is possible for us to live stream most remote platforms with our Granica software. The issue is that I would have to be at the historic courthouse by myself, plugged into the machine, or Caitlin would, to do that. Nobody else would need to be there, but I don't know that now is the right time for us to test that. So it's an option we can use in the future, but I don't know that now is when we need to do it. So after the board directed staff to do this, I knew I could not do this by myself in any way. So I had the great good luck of asking multiple people if they'd be willing to help. And everybody I asked said yes, and I even had people I didn't ask volunteer. So that is one thing I love about working in Chatham County. Everybody chips in, everybody is willing to do extra work, and I just really appreciate it. So the conference staff, Caitlin's been great. The conference center staff has been amazing. Big shout out to Jason Sullivan and the planning staff. They didn't just participate and test. They researched and provided me a lot of information I wouldn't have gotten if I had just been doing it on my own, so I really thank them for that. The manager's office staff, they, bless their hearts, they sat through a test that was totally pointless in a way, but they did it, and we wouldn't have known it was pointless if they hadn't done it, so I really appreciate that. Mike Wrights has nothing to do with these meetings, but he emailed me and said, whatever you need me to do, you let me know and I'll do it. So I really appreciate that. And of course, our MIS staff has been wonderful and helping us figure out what we actually are capable of doing and what limitations we might have. So thank you to all of them. So we After I talked personally to 17 jurisdictions in North Carolina, and then with planning, sending me information from out of state, in state, all kinds of information, these are the platforms that we investigated. So Zoom is probably what people are most familiar with. Zoom is great, but we feel like, as you might have heard in the news, Zoom has a lot of vulnerabilities. And just with the amount of interest we have in some public hearings coming up, we felt like we could not afford for the county to be attacked during a meeting, or somebody hijack the meeting, and then we'd have to shut the whole thing down and figure that out. So we decided not to go with Zoom. GoToMeeting, we already have an account with GoToMeeting, and we were pretty familiar with it. GoToMeeting is great, but it doesn't offer some of the administrative features that I would need or Caitlin would need to actually run the meeting in a way that was acceptable to all parties. So that brought us to GoToWebinar, and I thank Nick Robinson for letting us know about Southern Pines so that we could attend a GoToWebinar as attendees just to see how it works. That was a really good experience. I know it was for a much smaller issue than what Chatham is facing, but it was a good way to get just kind of an idea of how it worked. Then Mike Wrights told us about Maestro Conference. That is what the state EM department is using for the governor's press briefings. Really awesome, robust platform, but it has some limitations that we absolutely have to have. So you can only have one person on the screen at a time instead of all 5 commissioners during the discussion, and we just felt like that was not possible. We looked at Microsoft Teams, and while we didn't go with that option for what we have coming up, I think that's a great thing for us to look into for the future. There's actually a way that you can video a room and incorporate it into a remote meeting, whereas most of these other platforms don't allow that. And then Granicus, I've already talked about. We can live stream one of these other platforms through our live stream if we need to. And then WebEx has been around for a long time, a Cisco product. It's great as well, but felt like GoToWebinar had some better features that would be better for us. Sorry, I'm just gonna get my water. So after all of this research and trial and error, this is what we've come up with. And first, I would like to really thank, I thank the residents who spoke earlier, and the residents have been wonderful at giving me input on what they think would be helpful, in addition to Nick Robinson with his input. But I really tried to listen to what they had to say to make sure we were doing our best to meet some of the things that they were expecting. So the one thing that I heard is that people want to actually see you in the room, the commissioners in the room, while they are speaking to you. So we believe that all the commissioners can be present at the Ag Center. Each one of you will be on your own laptop. You will be recording into that laptop with a microphone and the camera, and that will be broadcast all over God's creation. So we'll have it in all the rooms here, as well as people looking at it from home. Then we would have, based on whatever the restrictions are on mass gatherings at the time that we have a hearing, we would allow a certain number of residents to attend in the room with you, and then we would have overflow rooms like we do today in the Ag Center, and we can even have overflow in the historic courthouse and possibly the old Ag Auditorium. So that will allow us to accommodate more people in person. Residents will be able to watch the GoToWebinar broadcast at home. Also, staff can participate in person or remotely. I don't think there's a need for all staff to actually be here, but we want all of you to be here so that we know you have a good internet connection, and it's just a little more secure that way. Presenters, including the applicants, can attend remotely or in person. I know I've talked to a couple who they want to be able to attend in person, and I think that we can make that happen with no problem. So the residents that are in the meeting room with you, so just imagine this is the room. You will be here, residents will be over here. They will walk to a podium with a laptop and give comments into that laptop so that their face is recorded and their voice is recorded. The residents in overflow rooms are going to do the same thing, or we can do like we did tonight, allow people to come in one at a time from other rooms. So we would start in one room, work our way to the next, then go to the historic courthouse. Let me pause really quick before I keep going. So one thing we learned in our test last week was that we cannot have microphones on in this room while you were talking on this broadcast because there's a delay and you're going to be hearing yourself while you're talking on a delay. So the way we tested it is there will be no microphones in here. If it was this whole side of the meeting hall, the sound would not be played over the speakers. So everybody's going to have to really speak up so the people in this room could hear. And that was based on the request that residents said, I want to be able to be in the room with the commissioners. So having said that, I think there is still a possibility we will need to close this wall, have you talking into your laptops, and have the sound on in the other rooms. I know that's not what everybody wanted. I think that's a better option, and have people come in one at a time to speak instead of having one big room where it's not going to be as easy for them to hear. Everybody at home and in another room is going to hear fine, but the people in the room with you might not be able to hear so well. Does that make sense?
Lindsay, so are you saying that the microphone on the laptop is what would be picking up our conversation, and we just won't have this kind of microphone that we have in front of us now?
Right, because that sound will be coming, there's a delay on the webcast, so there are going to be two sound feeds coming into that broadcast.
How would the visual aid work? Is there
So we make people presenters. So this laptop would be set up to be a presenter, and we, as administrators, Caitlin and I, or whoever else we deem, would make that person a presenter at that moment. So there's always something on the screen.
But I mean, if a resident or an applicant or staff, if we wanted to see a document, a site plan, or everybody's able to just.
Everybody, we make a presenter. So the applicant would be able to come on this computer, pull up whatever they want, and it'd be shared with everybody.
Okay.
So a resident watching from home cannot share their screen with us.
Right.
Only the people that we allow to share their screen. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I gotcha. But anybody could be a presenter. I mean, if I'm watching at home and I want to show the distance of a project in my house, I mean, folks have.
They would have to let us know, and we'd have to ask if you're okay with them being a presenter and make them a presenter.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's another limitation to a lot of these softwares. We can't make people presenters before the meeting starts. So we would ask all presenters to log on 30 minutes early so that we can make them presenters before the actual 6 o'clock meeting or whatever starts. Same for you as panelists. I can't make you a panelist until you're actually here on your computer to do that. So that's the only reason I would say we wouldn't want to really do presenters on the fly. That might be a little hard. We need to know who they are.
Sure.
So there's a feature on GoToWebinar where residents at home participating on the web, not by phone, but actually on their computers on the web, can raise their hand. So after we did all the public input that's in person, we can ask people if you would still like to give your comments, raise your hand. We unmute them one at a time, let them give their comments, mute them back, and then go to the next person. So the final option we developed, and I thank Onslow County for this because I had not thought about it until I talked to them. MIS have been able to set up a voicemail line that is specifically for public input. So it will call to a number. That number will allow 3 minutes of comments, and those comments will be emailed to me for me to organize for the meeting. And then at a point in the meeting, when we're ready, I can play those recordings into the record live at the meeting. And we heard, I think some residents thought that was a really good compromise for people who are afraid to come speak in person or don't have the technology capabilities to get on the webcast. We are working right now, we haven't got it worked out yet, but I know it's possible, of getting toll-free numbers, because obviously we don't want somebody to be on a 5-hour meeting long distance. So we're working on getting the remote-free number for people to just call and listen in. So I think that is a good option as well. So any questions about this so far?
I do have a question about how we ensure that the participants are legitimate participants.
That's a very good question. They have to register ahead of time. So you don't just click a link and join. You have to click a link, type in your name. We can require other information if we want to ask people other information. And then they're sent a link for them to join once they've registered. So we control who is allowed to speak and who is allowed to be seen. So even if somebody we don't want has registered, this is much more secure because they can't just start using their webcam and their microphone to interrupt us. We have to actually do that for them.
In other words, everybody's muted?
Yes, everybody, but we'll make the commissioners live the whole time and the presenter at that time, and everybody else will remain muted.
And we're talking about GoToWebinar in particular, right? Does it have a chat function?
It does.
And is that something that we manage as well, or is that, okay?
There's also so tomorrow I have a training with the entire planning department, and we're gonna test the chat function. There's also a question function. That seemed a little more complicated because people are typing a question expecting an answer back during the meeting. So we would have to kind of work out how we would manage that. But the chat features is real easy. People can, and it's a really good way for the staff who are working to be able to chat with each other too. But there is that feature.
I'm sure there would be, I like the idea of the voicemail too as a possibility with with people recording their 3 minutes and then it would cut them off at 3 minutes, correct? But there might be people that do that and then also show up to make public comment live.
Yes, so that is another reason. Let me get to the recommendation. That is a really good reason of why we want to hold off on some larger public hearings until we test all these features for something just like that. I think I don't know everybody in Chatham County, so you can register for the webinar under one name and sign up to speak a different way under another name, and I won't know. So we're gonna have to work those. I don't think we're gonna know until we try.
Yeah.
That answers that. So the Appearance Commission and Planning Board are going to use GoToWebinar. The Appearance Commission's meeting is next Wednesday, I think, or Wednesday or Thursday. And theirs is going to be totally remote. We're just testing out the remote part of this. And Planning Board is going to use it at their meeting the first week of June. Theirs is also going to be fully remote. And I think that'll give us an opportunity to work out some kinks on the staff side to make sure we really know what we're doing. We've got a good flow with how that works. I think testing the public hearing that planning recommended in June would be a good way for us to see if all of this works. We also have several things planned for the work session, so I feel like we might have some time. If things don't go quite right during the work session, we'll be able to work those out before the night session, but like I said, I just don't think we know until we give it a try. And then it is our recommendation that we hold Williams Corner and the Vickers-Bennett public hearings until after June 15th. I completely understand people wanting to go ahead and move forward with things. I'm just a little concerned and I'm just being honest with you, of staff's ability to manage something very large as our first test of this.
Yeah.
I will answer any questions.
One thing, a question I did have. So the Granicus would not be used in conjunction with the webinar?
So we could, so the way that would work is I would go plug in my computer to, it's called our encoder, and that is what live streams at the historic courthouse for all of our meetings. And that live stream goes to a link on our Legistar Granicus website, which is where we direct people to go watch the videos. I can plug in to that piece of equipment and stream the GoToWebinar from that equipment so that it goes to that link, and I'm also able to timestamp everything like I normally would. So when we're over here, I'm not timestamping the minutes in the video because we don't have that piece of equipment. So it is possible. I'm not ready to use it yet, but we could do it.
So would that something you'd want to test also in June?
I think that's one added component that might be just a little too much to try at one time. If we could baby step this a little bit, I think that would be good.
Yeah. I mean, I think these are great recommendations, but I do see lots of potential for things to not work out, either through human error, right? The public is not going to, it can be a difficult grasp. You may have people that go by Bill or William, and so multiple participation of the same person, but you may also have multiple people with the same name, and it may appear that they are giving more than one input, right? A junior and a senior who don't necessarily use junior and senior, or worse yet, people that actually have malintent and are taking it as an opportunity to do something foolish. So I think it certainly is wise, even if we were not in the midst of a pandemic, I think it would be wise to test this technology on a less contentious, smaller, more manageable issue. And I will just say that given the circumstances that we are dealing with, given the increased risk that we are already putting staff at by having meetings, having public come in, I am not comfortable with saying that a public hearing trumps that. My sense is that the extent to which we can limit the amount of time we spend in a confined space, limit the number of people that are in that confined space, give people as many opportunities to participate without coming into contact with other people while we are grappling with this, it's absolutely incumbent on us to do that. And I completely reject the notion that it would make sense for us, any of us, to sit in a room together for 3 hours and risk our health for the benefit of something that will not be significantly impacted because of the landscape, because of the confusion and the uncertainty that we're looking at, I think would be foolhardy for us to do. And I would seriously urge us to go ahead with doing the kind of softer run-through on a smaller matter and give ourselves some time to make sure that we're doing it right and we're doing it the best way possible, and that we're taking into account the health risk that some people will be confronting when making that decision, whether to come out.
So I will say, when we did our test on Wednesday, there was some really good discussion. I appreciated the input from the team, that it might be, normally we let people sign up when they arrive. For a meeting like this, it might be that we say it's a requirement. You have to sign up ahead of time, and you have to sign up and let us know if you want to attend in person, and we have to keep track of how many people we can allow to attend in person. And then after that, we give people the option, if you want to attend online, we need your information of how you're going to sign on to this meeting. And then voicemail, I will listen to each voicemail before I play it at the meeting to make sure it's not a duplicate. That I think we can control. But I think that is something for you to think about, is making it mandatory that you must sign up by 5 p.m. on a Friday before a Monday meeting.
Just a question for Jep. Can you kind of run through? We do not traditionally hold public hearings in July, but is that a prohibition, or is that something?
It's the ordinance says they shall be held, and it lists the months, and it does not list July and December. So what it is not clear, but I think it's probably a prohibition against doing it in July. I think it really is dates back to the period when the commissioners didn't meet those months. They didn't meet, and you met twice a month, but it's the final meeting. Now you don't have but one meeting, and that's the final meeting each month.
I think my big concern is just that we get backed up on multiple projects. So I don't know if that's something where we want to do 2 meetings in June, or 2 meetings in August, something to kind of.
I think June would be really pushing it. If we're saying that staff is pushed as it is to do this one meeting in June and make sure we have everything in place, I think we'd like asking for 2 in June. But whether we want to, we do have the other meetings on the agenda for August, September, et cetera, whatever.
Right.
So planning's not here to speak, so I feel like I probably should throw this out there. They schedule public hearings the third Monday because of how the timing works with notices, planning board meetings, appearance commission meetings. They all trigger this line of things to happen. And if we were to, I don't know that you could say we're going to have 2 in July without talking to them first to see if that's even an option.
Sure.
And I will say, it is disappointing if we're getting backed up, but disappointing is a small pill to swallow, right? And I think the reason that we're being confronted with this risk of disappointing people who are, and you know, businesses and organizations that are looking at having these matters heard is an overwhelming reason. And so I just fall back on that. We are not arbitrarily choosing. We are in a critical crisis and making a decision that we hope is for the benefit of all of us and not only based on the need to get business taken care of, although that is absolutely a goal of ours.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I think my larger concern maybe is that, you know, as concerned as we are about the economic impacts, and particularly locally, that if we're doing things that that are contributing to delaying projects and slowing things down, then I think that has kind of a ripple effect through. So I just, you know, I have that concern when developers and folks are dependent on financing and all kinds of things. And I know, you know, our obligation is not to them, but I do worry about the long-term economic impacts that we end up creating kind of a longer recession than we intend to by slowing some things down. So.
But you know, I mean, let's remember, even the individuals who are being potentially disadvantaged or disappointed, their health matters too, right? So this isn't you know, people who are for or against the project are winning the argument if we delay. It's all of us. It's the financiers. It's the people that are going to do the construction. It's the consultants. It's the you know, applicants. All of our health is what we're trying to find a balance with. And so I think we are striking that balance, right? We have done a considerable amount of work in a month to come up with a plan that will get us closer to the goal of ensuring that we have proper access to the public. And I think the greater risk is if we do this in a way that seems haphazard and the public is dissatisfied, that legal action could stall projects for months beyond what we're looking at right here, right? If we're talking about a meeting in August, I don't think we're not doing it lightly. And to me, it feels reasonable and pragmatic and responsible.
May I say something also?
Yes.
I think the last recommendation was, you know, since we can't hold planning matters in July, at our July meeting, and it's limited to the third, perhaps in circumstances, the third Monday, perhaps, is that in our ordinance? We could, in fact, have 2 meetings in August, could we not? And also, if the planning board is meeting, one of those the extra meeting could also handle you know, an issue that up for a public hearing. Is that not so? That they could do that?
One of them would be a regular meeting, one of them would be a special meeting. You could have 2, certainly.
You could have 2.
So I think you could have 2. The way that I understand the process, I don't think you could have it the first Monday of the month. I think it might have to come after that third Monday so that the timing is not messed up for all those other advisory committees to meet. So I think that's the issue, is trying to have something the first Monday of the month, because the planning board doesn't meet until the second Tuesday, or the first Tuesday. And then appearance commission meets the night before the agenda goes out, if it would happen like that. So
But
to
even
basically,
so,
I
that
guess
could, there's enough time here if we're looking at perhaps
Yeah,
adding
and
a
it wouldn't have to
meeting
be
in
on Monday.
Au-
It could be,
August.
it could be on another night, if that would work, if that would help matters.
Well, I guess the question would be, would the planning board have met and already have a matter ready so that we could
in
schedule
August.
our meeting? And that was what Lindsay was saying she couldn't really speak to.
Yeah, I think we'll have to ask Jason that.
Yeah, because that might solve part of the dilemma here. If we choose not to have a major public hearing, we already know that Williams Corner is a major public hearing, and postpone that until after we go through the in-person and remote options for our June meeting, could we not schedule both the first Monday and the third Monday of August for some of the planning public hearings, so that, you know, simply because there's lead time now, there's 2 months, or 2 months there. So is that a possibility?
So, and I think, Diana, I think you're
on,
not talking
Dan.
about a special meeting, right? I
No,
think she's
I'm
talking about
talking-
using the
Using that first Monday in August.
meeting that we reserve as
Right,
our
right.
second meeting.
Yep, could you let Dan share your microphone? His is not working.
I do think that we need to run that by Jason. I know their calendar is very detailed as to how they line these projects up. So we could check with Jason and see how we could do that. But I think
that
that's
would be
important that we do that first.
because the September is always Labor Day, so you don't want to do that. But is it possible to have 2 meetings in August where you have the planning agenda at the Board of Commissioners?
We'll check with that and see if that's something that, if they can hold the 2 public hearings in 1 month like that.
Yeah, because I'm sure that, well, we have a possibility of one in June, a project in Bonnley, I guess. Jason had mentioned it.
Oh, so Jason just emailed me.
I was going to
Since
say,
he's
I can
listening, so
ask Jason to send us an email really quickly.
let me-
Jason's listening.
Lindsay was correct in stating that the entire rezoning calendar is based on the BOC meeting the 3rd Monday of the month.
Right, but could we hold one the first Monday in August?
We'll see
Also.
if Jason responds to that, and we can always follow up later,
Yes.
commissioners, and we will let you know. I think that is if it's possible on planning side, we will see if we can do that. If not, I mean, we can always catch up on it as we go. If we do get too far behind, we can start to bunch these up a little more. It might just
Yeah.
mean longer nights.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, that takes us back to Karen's point. It's not a good idea. What we want to avoid is a 5-hour meeting. Right now, we want to not have a 5-hour meeting.
Right.
So we know Williams Corner is controversial, and we know that there's another project coming down the pike that is also going to be highly
Well,
controversial.
Let me interject. You can allocate a certain amount of time to each side, and that would not require you to go for 5 hours.
Right. And I don't think that Dan was suggesting that we would just have long meetings right now. I think the plan, my understanding was that he was saying that if this projects out months, we would just be having longer meetings in the future, and presumably we wouldn't be in a shutdown of the world, right? We're hoping that we're moving into something more manageable in terms of the risk to public health.
Sorry, we have to keep doing this. I will say, yes, Commissioner Hales, I was thinking some of these more controversial ones are going to need to be their meeting of their own. But we have others where we have smaller public hearings that if they're bunched up, you know we could do a number of those, even though if they were calendared, it'd be 2 this meeting, 2 the next meeting. We could do those 4 in one meeting and still not take that much time. You know how a lot of our
Correct.
public hearings do go.
Yeah.
And our planning staff does a great job of identifying those as well.
Right. So what is our action here tonight that you want to get to?
I would say we would like some direction about what you want to see in June. If you want to go forward with the recommendation as we gave it this evening, or
So can we just get consensus of the board to go forward with the recommendation? Yep.
For a webinar?
Okay.
Yes.
Andy, this I feel, okay. To go with the go to webinar. Yes.
And I did want to say before I forget, just because we're talking about budget tonight, GoToWebinar, we have to purchase it for a year, and it's $2,400 a year. So we were very fortunate in a way that because of the pandemic, our travel budget for the commission, for the governing board, it was not nearly all spent. So we had plenty of money. And next year, because this August, we won't be going to the county commissioners conference, there'll be enough money to cover it for another year if we decide to choose for it.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. All right, so wait, could that have been the clerk's report, or is there more?
Oh, there's more.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
And just to kind of follow up, so will we have then some recommendation from planning in June as to consolidating some of these public hearings, or how we're moving forward? I feel like that's still left kind of a little bit vague, and which I totally understand. I really feel like, we have a responsibility. I know this is, unprecedented times, but to figure out workarounds and to continue to do our jobs, and I just want to
Yes.
make sure that we're.
We can work with planning staff, and Jason did just email. He did say our ordinance states that public hearings shall be held the last meeting of the month. So it says the last regular meeting of the month. So that's when we would have to have that. But we can work with Jason. I think we would like direction on when we should hold some of them. If you would like to move the more controversial ones to the August meeting, one of them at least to that, which I would assume be Williams Corner, would that be the wish of the board to schedule
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Yes.
And I will remind you, as you said, and as Mr. Robinson pointed out, there's another public hearing that is also going to be equally controversial, and that's 3 public hearings, I believe, for that one project. So I would think we would try to schedule that one soon after after the Williams Corner.
Okay.
And is there any concern, Jep, about, leapfrogging some of these later applicants? Mr. Robinson mentioned, that might be prejudicial to Williams Corner. I just want to make sure we're not.
Well, I think the board's got pretty broad discretion in terms of scheduling them, and it certainly makes sense to go ahead and take care of your less controversial ones first, particularly since you're experimenting with the equipment.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Ready for clerk's
Yes,
reports?
I
Okay.
am.
The Lindsay Show. Today, you have June 1st on the BOC meeting calendar. Today was the day agenda items were due for the June 1st meeting. I received none. So I do not know if it would be the board's pleasure to go ahead and cancel that meeting, or if you see any reason to meet on June 1st.
I do not. Does anyone? Is there anyone that thinks we need to meet on June 1st? Hearing nothing.
All right, we will cancel June 1st.
We'll cancel the June 1st meeting, okay.
And then I really wanted to tell you about something that I think is super awesome. I've been here almost 9 years, and the whole time I've been here, I have wanted to get the copies of all the minute books onto the county website. And what I mean is, right now what's on the website are the Word documents of minutes. It doesn't include all the supporting documents and attachments. And so Caitlin has done something pretty amazing. She has gotten all the minute books from the 1800s to 2018. on the website, and I meant to make it live before I got here, and I didn't, so I'll make that live tomorrow morning. But I think residents are really going to be excited that they can go look through all this historical material to find some things that in the past I've had to go search, by hand, and it's just, we've made as many, she made as many of them as possible searchable. So you should be able to go to the search bar on the county website, type stuff in, and it'll start searching most of those minutes. So I want to thank Caitlin, because that took her 2 months.
Yes.
And Caitlin and our county paralegal, Ann Hammock, are also working on the resolutions, getting all of those on the website. We started that in 2011. I have resolutions in my office going back to 1993, so they are working on getting all of those uploaded as well. So I feel like it's been a really good use of time during the pandemic, and I hope residents really enjoy it.
That's wonderful. That's really good to hear. When she started to say that, I was like, this doesn't sound that exciting, but it does. So thank you very much. All right,
Okay.
Lindsay, is that it? The Lindsay show is over, and we will now turn to managers' reports.
All right, thank you. So I got a number of things. First, I'd like to give you an update on where we stand with the COVID response. To date, we have conducted 1,551 tests. I understand from Leighton and his staff that is likely higher than that of tests we've performed, because some of the privates aren't necessarily reporting it the way in a timely manner. We have 512 total positive cases. We've had 1,039 negative cases to date. And 272 people have been resolved or discharged to date, so recovered. And of course, unfortunately, we have 24 total deaths to date. You may have heard that we had a big spike at the end of last week. That was actually just a reporting delay in the time that those were all reported on the same date, but it actually was not that instantaneous as it seemed. As far as the county and how we're recovering from this, we have a plan. We've actually sent out a survey to all staff and departments for their reconstitution plan of how they're going to reconstitute our contact with the public and opening of lobbies, libraries, parks, DSS waiting areas, things like that. We are coming up with a plan of how we'll do that, and I've instructed the team to come up with a coordination of that with the governor's phases of reopening, so that we have these triggers and which departments, as you know, some of our libraries is very different from Register of Deeds lobby. So there's a number of different types of activities. Some of our programming for parks has already been canceled. A lot of the camps that Cooperative Extension is doing have been canceled, and everybody's looking at ways to adapt those and do some online things. I've been hearing more things about that, more to come on that. We have developed, our EDC developed a guide for businesses, how to reopen their businesses, things to look at. Very good guide. It went out in a press release a couple weeks ago. That was EDC and Chatham County staff in cooperation with a number of the chamber in Chapel Hill Orange. A number of different organizations all came together on that, and it's a wonderful document if you've had time to look at that. It's very long, but it describes different businesses and how you deal with the reopening of your different type of business. So we think that's going to be really good for all our businesses. We're also the CARES Act, as you know, the state approved, our legislature approved an allocation plan for the federal funding from the CARES Act. That takes a lot of detail accounting for the expenditure of those funds. It has to be COVID related. It looks like the numbers I've seen are about $1.4 million for Chatham County. This will be working with all of our agencies here as well as towns to document uses that are strictly COVID related or eligible for this reimbursement. Our understanding is that we receive the funds, we allocate what we can to that, and we return whatever we don't spend. And this is by December 30th. So many things can change between now and then, but we are having a meeting tomorrow. We're thinking of having our staff person, Courtney Cooper-Luter, work on that. It's an extensive, exhaustive bunch of work to keep up with this and track and detail all this work. And of course, we believe that those funds will also pay for that staff position as well.
When will the funds be received?
We have just applied for that, and we should be receiving the funds soon, but
Oh,
not sure
soon,
when that
okay.
is. But we had to apply for it first. And we also have to submit a plan by June 1st, sorry. That is another thing. And that's an interesting thing. I have a lot of questions about what a plan is when we don't know what's going to happen between now and December 30th. So it is amendable. We can change the plan, so we will come up with a plan of how to spend that, meeting all the requirements of the law and of the CARES Act. And then we'll adjust that as we need to. We'll learn more as this goes. Of course, everybody's trying to figure that out. We've been working with the association and the league on how this is supposed to work. But moving along with that. And that is what I have for the COVID response. A couple of other things. As you know, Leighton Long, he spoke at our last meeting and was talking about his retirement. Well, he extended his retirement, so he actually leaves the end of this month. We're so happy that he did decide to stick around another month. I am eternally grateful to him for doing that. Mike Zellick is ready to step into that role as the interim. We're excited about that. Sorry to see Leighton go, but excited for what the future holds for Chatham on the health department. Also, Darlene Udell, our MIS director, is retiring at the end of May. Darlene's been with us almost 6 years. She's got 22 years of service in local government. She worked in Moore County and Guilford County. And Darlene has made great strides here in things that most people don't really realize. You know some of her work with broadband and rural broadband. She's done more on that than anyone else has in the 10 years I've been here. We are closer. It is a very difficult thing, as you all know, to tackle, but she has made great strides with that. And the one thing that's behind the scenes that nobody really sees that she's done phenomenal work with is increasing our security of our network. You hear about it all around us of people with ransomware getting into 911 systems and other, local governments near us. She's done a tremendous amount of work to provide increased security on our network against those cyber attacks, which happen all the time. And so I'm eternally thankful to her for that. I will announce that Nick Halfley, who is our GIS director, I've appointed him as the interim MIS director. I'm excited for what future holds for that as well. So, that, and I'll, just as a point of interest, I will be assisting Pittsburgh with assessments for their new town manager. That'll be happening in early June. And I understand they received quite a few applications for that. So. And that's all I have.
Great. All right. Thank you. So we'll have commissioners' reports, and we will start with you, Andy Wilkie.
I want to thank the staff for the efforts they've made in getting us together tonight. This was a whole lot better meeting than the last one. And for the efforts they've made in the future meetings we're going to have. Thank you very much.
Mike Tash.
Yeah, I'll just echo Commissioner Wilkie's comments. Thank you all. And thank you to all the staff that have worked so hard through this whole ordeal. I know these are difficult times for everybody, and I've been just really proud and pleased to see how well Chatham County staff have performed. I did have one question, Dan. If I'm sort of predicting the future, right, which is dangerous, it looks like this Friday maybe the state will go into phase 2, which will allow for some reopening of restaurants and dining. Is that something that would our public health folks be, inspecting those restaurants? I'm a little, I guess, confused about how that's going to work. Are we just relying on people to follow the rules? Or?
At this point, I don't believe that is something that our restaurant inspectors look at. It is something that we expect everyone to follow the governor's orders when he does reduce that. I think it's, and again, none of this, actually, I was listening to the governor today. He said that more detailed plans, as he did with phase 1, more detailed plans for what could happen on Friday, he did specify could, would be coming out in the coming days. If it follows suit with the phase 1, he came out with what the phase 1 details would be on Wednesday before the Friday that it went into effect. So I'm expecting something tomorrow or Wednesday from the governor's office as to what this really means. He didn't telegraph today how many people that meant gathering in one place. He did say that it would likely be an increase, but he still cautioned that there's still an issue out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know some of the early talk was 50% capacity in restaurants. But who knows if that's, I don't know if that's what he'll come out with at this point. So as far as enforcement, that is a good question. It has been a question all along with this and how that would be enforced.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have a good answer for that.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay, Diana?
Yes. Well, for one thing, the restaurants are going to be very interesting. I know I happened to, over the weekend, Siler City has a very popular seafood restaurant called Dry Dock, and the car line to the front door was absolutely amazing. On I think it was Saturday, I was driving by. So obviously it's all takeout, but the line was, I don't even know how many cars deep. I lost count at about 40. But one thing I did want to bring up, all the commissioners should have received a request from the Haw River Assembly regarding the wetlands permit applications. It's requirement when you're impacting streams and wetlands. And it's the state is called a 401 permit, and the Army Corps of Engineers, which has jurisdictional authority, is their 404 permit, but they're like a joint permit. And that review is, the deadline is for comment is actually tomorrow, May 19th, for the state's 401 permit. And the application, this is for Chatham Park, and it's a 900-page application. And the posting by the Army Corps of Engineers is dated, I believe, April 29th. Yeah, April 29th, and the comment deadline for them is May 28th, but the state has moved theirs up to May 19th. That is not a lot of time, and considering that this application, the 401, 404 permit will live on in this project for the rest of time. This is not a small thing. This is a large thing. And the request has been made for Chatham Board of Commissioners to write a letter asking for a 60-day extension, first of all, right off the bat, for public comment and also a public hearing on this matter. And the third item that I did a little investigation myself is for an environmental impact study. There was no, even an environmental impact assessment done for Chatham Park. It is not there. It was never done. And the amount of linear feet that this is a huge project, and the amount of linear feet and acreage that is going to be involved with Chatham Park should have had an environmental impact study. So I would propose, and I would make a motion now, that the County Board of Commissioners just send a request, and this can be through the county manager, requesting a 60-day extension on this, on the public comment, and that because of the size of the project and because of the interest, remember, this land is still in Pittsburgh's ETJ. It has not been annexed. So it is still in their planning authority, but it's still under the county. And furthermore, that we would recommend the inclusion of an environmental impact, I guess it's a statement rather than a study, but it is a study. An environmental impact assessment, which is a much lower level paper kind of attachment to a planning application, is nowhere near the depth of an environmental impact statement. And an environmental impact statement deals with just with facts. So it seems that this would be the appropriate time for that for that to occur, if that is the decision of the state. This would be their decision. So I would do I need to make a motion? Because I will be happy to do so.
I'll let the manager speak.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, thank you, Commissioner Hales. And I have a letter to that effect already drawn up for the chair's vote, signature, if the board so chooses to do it. I would like to give a little background of what that project is. This is the Chatham Parkway extension that is going from the end of Chatham Parkway, just north of the 64 bypass, that loops around up to 15501. So you remember that project in the STIP. That's what this project is for. And I have a copy of the letter. I'll hand them out to each of you if you would like to look over what I've done. I really took what the Haw River Assembly had asked of the board and just put that in letter form.
Thank you.
Do you know if, is this something that Pittsburgh's board is also chiming in on? Do we know?
I did have a conversation that hasn't been brought to their board at all.
Thank you.
So that doesn't mean it won't come up at their meeting next week, but
Yeah.
at this point in time, it has not been brought forward.
Yeah, I think that would be my only concern. I certainly have no objections to sending this, but given that it is in Pittsburgh's jurisdiction, that we're not stepping on anybody's toes, but you know, I would.
So I think that would be
support that motion.
additive, right? But given that, you know, the people in the ETJ don't get to vote for the Pittsburgh Town Board, and they
Sure.
do all get to vote for the commissioners, I think we do still get to have a voice. Diana, did you read the letter?
Yes, I did. And
And is
I would move to, for the chair to send the letter as presented by the county manager, and that was to urge the Department of Environmental Quality and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to extend comment deadline for the permit application. This is the 401 and 404 permits, by 60 days, and hold a public hearing when it is safe to do so. I am urging both agencies to request an environmental impact statement for this project from Chatham Park investors and the Department of Transportation.
Okay. Did we need to reference both permits in the the 401 and 404? Or is that-
It's addressed to both in their joint applications.
Yeah.
Okay.
Between the 401 and 404 are joint, and it's identified by the 404 project code.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of this draft, of the draft being signed by the chair and sent to the Department of Transportation and the Army Corps of Engineers?
Aye.
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 Great.
All right.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Diana, was that it?
That
Did you-
was it. I've got lots of gardening photographs, but
Well, we'll move right on to Jim Crawford. He has some great gardening photographs, too.
Yes, lots of sunflowers were put in. Just to let everybody know, the Health Board is still meeting. In fact, they're meeting tonight, and they're doing virtual meetings, so they're dealing with contingencies. As the Vice President of the Board, I can assure you that there is not enough staff to go around and police how folks are practicing social distancing under whatever phase, but if a clear need arose, then it would probably be addressed. CCCC also is getting ready for, hopefully, the time when classes can open, and the Board of Trustees is also meeting virtually, so policy work is still getting done there, and budgets are still being maintained. Same is also true for Triangle J. In fact, we have a delegates meeting.
Jim.
We have a delegates meeting of Triangle J on Wednesday, and it's all being done virtually. So all the things I'm involved in is basically shifting to this mode of operation. And, we're doing the best that we can all around. And I too would like to tip my hat to staff and also the public for being patient with us as we try to go through as thoroughly as we can each of the matters before the board. But that's really all I have today.
All right, thank you. So I do have two quick things, they're not small, but I only have limited information. The Department of Transportation gave an update to the DCHC MPO board meeting last week, and there are significant shortfalls for the Department of Transportation, and we're going to see some ripple effect happen back toward the county's projects that won't be able to be completed. They've already stopped mowing. And it's, they are just really beginning to assess the extent to which their budgetary woes are going to affect us all. And I think it means that we're really going to have to stop and think about how some of the projects that we might have had in line are going to be affected. And we also need to know that, so some of their projects were, the financing happened that the county would go ahead and fund the project and DOT would reimburse and it would move your project up in line. And the date, it was to a date uncertain for repayment. Those projects are at a real risk of not being able to be paid. And so, we're in this grave reality where there simply is not enough money to do the things that we all know need to be done. And we're going to have to revisit how we do things, how we decide what our priorities are going to be. But listening to the kinds of deficits that DOT is facing was jarring, to say the least. I just wanted to say, so I've already thanked staff and Lindsay and everyone. Love your project, Caitlin. I will be checking it out. But I also want to reiterate what Jim said and thank the public. And I want to remind everybody, so I've had conversations with health department members, with Leighton Long, with Dan, and we really do urge people to wear a mask in public to the greatest extent possible. I've heard some kind of cavalier conversations about who's at greatest risk. I've heard recent reports about the fact that children are perhaps being impacted in a way that we didn't understand before. And I want to say that I don't understand how, with 90,000 dead Americans, we're all not grieving right now. That we should be shattered. That's the entirety of Chatham County and all of our visitors gone, if we want to think about numbers. And those should shock us. That should shock the conscience. That should break our hearts. And to think that we would be cavalier about who those people might be and not wear a mask in defense of our own personal freedom just seems very far beneath who we really are. And so I urge people to not think so much about the hardship of wearing a mask, of limiting your going out. Think about the impact of losing one single loved one of yours and what this country will be grappling with and reeling from for years to come. As we look back on this, I think we're all acknowledging it actually gets harder, right? It becomes harder to stay in. It becomes harder to be without people. And I'm an extrovert, living with a bunch of introverts. It's hard to not walk up to strangers in Walmart and hug them. But I also know that there is not a single person who I have had even a terrible encounter with that I would wish this on. And so I don't wear a mask for me. I'm wearing a mask to protect you from me. And I hope that we can all think of it that way, that it's hard, but we can do hard things. And we're going to have to rethink the way we evaluate some of the things that are important to us. We're realizing that some of the people that aren't being paid well, that aren't being valued by our system, are actually some of the most important people to the system. And I think we're going to hear a very different conversation about teachers. I've tried to homeschool two 16-year-olds with varying degrees of non-success. And it's not for want of loving them, it's not for want of trying, it's not for want of time. there's a skill set there that I don't have. And I also want to commend Dan on the budget that has been presented and staff on what has been presented. I cannot imagine how difficult this was. And we're just, we're going to have some conversations, and I think the conversations will be hard. They were not what we anticipated. But I do think that it's a humane budget. It's a budget that values people and values things that are important to us. And if we are going to get through this, this is how we're going to have to do it. So thank you all. And that's the end of my high-flying speech.
Could I just make one more comment?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I know you're tired of hearing from me. I just really wanted to thank the conference center staff, Carolyn Miller, Larry Isley, Marty, Brandy, and Lacey. They have been amazing making sure that all of this worked. And I'd also like to thank Aaron Hall for live streaming for us, and for the conference center and Aaron working together to make sure we could get it done. So thank you all.
And thank you to my fellow board members. This is the first time that I'm seeing Andy Wilkie and Diana Hales in person since February. And it's good to be back. We may not all agree on everything, but I think we're a pretty awesome board when we get together and we do great things. So thank you all. Thank you for keeping each other safe, for putting up with the hassles of, trying to figure out how to meet, how to do this right. And I will call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.